Assalamualaikum everyone, I am Syahida Zaini and I will present about learning objective and learning outcome of KSSM General Science Textbook Form 4. Okay, now I will classify the presentations into 4 content, which first, the definitions of learning objective and learning outcomes. Second is the components of the learning objective and learning outcomes. There are 2 components, which are ABCD technique and SMART characteristic. Third is the example of learning objective and learning outcomes. It is divided into 2, which are well-written and poorly-written. Last but not least, I will critique overall of learning objective and learning outcomes from KBSM and KSSM textbook. First, let's get the definition straight. A learning objective is the instructor's purpose for creating and teaching their curriculum, course, lesson, or activity in terms of demonstrates skills or knowledge that will be acquired by a student as a result of instructions. These are the specific questions that the instructor wants their course to raise. Learning objectives are known to be made up of a number of components. ABCD technique is a best way to write an excellent learning objective. A is audience. Who are you addressing? Who is going to be doing the learning? You need to state that here because you want the learner to be at the forefront of a lesson. B is a behavior. What will the audience do? It may include knowledge, skills, and attitude. Behavior must be observable and measurable. Learning objectives are generally written based on Bloom's Taxonomy. Bloom's Taxonomy explains the process of learning and hence has proven to be a powerful tool to help develop learning objectives. The concept in Bloom's Taxonomy is very simple. First, before understanding the concept, remembering it well. Understand it before you apply it and analyze the process before you evaluate it. You need to identify what level of learning you want the learners to achieve. Bloom's Taxonomy has 6 levels of learning. The most basic level of learning is remembering, and the highest level of learning is creating. And here we need just to be specific and we need to use actions verbs like apply, analyze, judge, evaluate, create. All those are required here, but it's a good idea just to use one verb for learning objective that way we can maintain focus. C is conditions. What are the conditions or parameters for the behavior? Under what circumstances will the behavior take place? Will the learners need extra help? Is there something that they are going to do at school? All that needs to be specified. D is for degree. How well or how often will the behavior be performed? What degree or a level of proficiency is required? How can we measure a learning? By the way, if you don't state any, it means 100% accuracy. So, if not stated, it's always applied with 100% accuracy. So, common degrees is also include speed, accuracy, quantity, or quality. Now, this is an example of the poorly-written learning objective from curriculum specifications of KBSM General Science Form 4. This is the learning objective from Chapter 8, Chemicals in Industry. Understand the nature of other properties and its use in industry. You might want your students to know or understand a particular concept, but the objective should be written as to how you will be able to measure your students' level of knowing or understanding. Verbs like know, understands, comprehends, appreciates are sometimes referred as a solve verb. How will you know that your students understand and or how will they demonstrate their appreciations? So these demonstrations also allows you to observe the students' progress in meeting course outcomes and module learning objectives. Before using a verb like know or understands, ask whether you can Observe students carrying out the activity that is implied by the verb. Now, I will show you the well-written example of learning objective that follows and meets the ABCD technique. At the end of the topic, students should be able to discuss clearly the nature of alloy properties on its use in industry. You can see here that the learning objective stated follows the four components which are audience, behavior, conditions, and degree. Students is classified as the audience. Discuss is a verb chosen from the Bloom's taxonomy level, and it states as a behavior. Clearly is the degree or a level of proficiency. And the last one is the nature of alloy properties on its use in industries is shown as the conditions. Now we are going to focus on the definitions of learning outcomes. Learning outcomes describes what students should do or perform after a specific time period. They are the specific, measurable knowledge and skills that the learner will gain by taking a courses. Learning outcomes are generally written based on SMART characteristics. S stands for the specific, which precisely states what the learning will be able to do. M stands for measurable, as the learning outcomes can be observed or counted during or after the learning session. A stands for its actions-oriented, which means the learning outcomes should use an active verb that represents a behavior change or acquisition. R stands for reasonable, as there is needs and appropriate to the time and scope. T stands for times out, as the learning outcome expected to be achieved by the end of the learning. Now let's look forward to the example of learning outcomes. In the slides, we are going to analyze where the learning outcomes in DSKP General Science Form 4 state meets the characteristic of an excellent learning outcome or not. Based on the learning outcome, is this specific enough to define the compositions of the elements in the alloy? This is not specific or number of compositions stated in the learning outcome, so this is not specific enough. Are they measurable? Since there is no status how many components that students need to be achieved, so this learning outcome cannot be counted as measured well. Are they clearly defined? In my opinion, they are not, especially the learning outcomes stated in the textbook. This is because this learning outcome lacks of 5 characteristics for SMART. Are they observable? Based on my observations, this learning outcome is not really observable because there is a verb that describes an observable actions, what student will be able to do, but still these learning outcomes are not able to tell under what conditions they will be able to do and in the performance level they should able to reach. Alright, this is a purpose of learning outcomes that follows and meets the 5 characteristics of SMART. The learning outcomes start with the time bounds, which is by the end of the unit, followed by the actions-oriented, which students should be able to describe, and then goes to the measurable and reasonable terms, which falls in the 5 example sentences, and close it with specific, the compositions of the elements in the alloy. This is another purpose of learning outcomes from DSKP KSSM General Science Form 4. This slide shows the learning objective and learning outcomes of the first chapter in the General Science textbook. In the KBSM textbook, learning objective and learning outcome are provided. Meanwhile, in the KSSM textbook, only the learning objective is provided. In my opinion, both objective and learning outcomes should be input in the textbook. The learning objectives are more views by the teachers, and this will help them to plan a lesson or prepare a good material for their students. For learning outcomes, as I mentioned before, no learning outcome provided in the KSSM textbook. So in my opinion, learning outcomes should be included back in the textbook like the previous textbook, which KBSM textbook. Then, the learning outcomes should be listed and written down at the beginning of every new chapter. This is important to know or check whether the course was designed and conducted perfectly or not. Nevertheless, this will help students learn more efficiently. In my opinion, learning objective and outcome in the DSKP also need to be improved because some of them do not fulfill the requirements of SMART component. Some of it still not specific, some of it still not measurable, some of it still not relevant, and still doesn't have any time bound. In conclusion, learning objective and learning outcomes define the goals and expectations of a lesson. Learning objective for individual lesson connect to the broader goals of a unit or course. Not only do learning objectives help a teacher plan the curriculum, they also let students know what they will have learned by the end of the particular lesson. That's all for me. Thank you.